Her son declared her dead on live television. Eleanor Briggs, former civics teacher, lifelong voter and very much alive, did not correct him. She simply retrieved her absentee ballot, her voter ID, and a pen she hadn't used since the last midterm. By the time the mail ran on Monday, she'd submitted proof of life signed, stamped, and impossible to ignore. She didn't raise her voice. She raised the truth. And when the campaign unraveled, it wasn't with a scandal. It was with the sound of one mother refusing to stay buried. We're about to begin. But if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. The television flickered in the dusk, the volume just low enough for the silence to press in around it. Eleanor Briggs sat still in her worn armchair, a half-drunk cup of Earl Grey cooling at her elbow. On screen, the Cedar Falls City Council debate blazed on, bright lights, bold promises, sharp smiles, and then her son's voice cut through the quiet. My mother's passed, may she rest. She taught me everything I know about civic duty. Eleanor blinked. Her hand froze midair. A sugar cube poised over her saucer. Dina, Russell's polished wife, dipped her head gravely beside him, one practiced tear shimmering in the corner of her mascaraed eye. Eleanor didn't breathe. She wasn't confused. She wasn't dreaming. She wasn't dead. The silence snapped. She stood up. The ache in her knees reminded her she was 72 and very much alive. She walked with precise steps to the hallway drawer. Old wood, squeaky slide. She reached beneath a brittle folder of appliance warranties and pulled it out, her state-issued voter registration card, laminated and creased from years of wallet rides, alive, certified, dated. She stared at the name, Eleanor M.A. Briggs, like it belonged to someone else. A ghost who still paid taxes. On TV, Russell grinned as the audience clapped. Down the street, a knock echoed. She opened the door to Janice Keller, arms crossed, salt and pepper hair tucked beneath a pink Cubs cap. I saw it too, Janice said without preamble. He really tried to bury you in front of the whole damn town. Eleanor stepped aside to let her in. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but fury. Why? She asked, voice quiet but taut. Why would he do it? It's not like we were. She stopped herself. Janice shut the door with her foot. Because a dead mother doesn't vote, doesn't call out lies, doesn't show up at City Hall. She's just a sob story in a suit's mouth. Eleanor walked to the mantel, removed a tin box, and opened it. Inside were two things: a copy of her birth certificate, and an absentee ballot packet she hadn't touched yet. She pulled the packet out slowly, her breath hitching. It was unopened, untouched, undeniable. She held the unsigned ballot in her hand like it was a loaded gun. I was going to fill this out next week, she whispered, almost to herself. Well, Janice said, settling into the armchair like a soldier reporting for duty. Looks like you're on the campaign trail now, Ellie. Eleanor didn't respond. She walked back to the kitchen table and placed the ballot down gently, like setting a chess piece before a war. She remembered teaching Russell about civic duty at that very table. He was 8, the night Reagan debated Mondale. She made popcorn, and they circled policy differences in the Des Moines Register. He used to care, or maybe he'd just known how to pretend even then. On screen, the moderator moved on. The town hall clapped. Eleanor muted the television. Jan, she said carefully, do you still have that scanner? Sure do. I need to send someone proof of life? Who? Eleanor's fingers rested on her voter card, her absentee ballot now opened in front of her like a declaration. I don't know yet, she said. But someone who can still tell the truth. Janice's eyes gleamed. Then let's blow the dust off that machine. Thunder cracked faintly outside, rolling over the Iowa cornfields in low, ominous tones. Rain began tapping the windows, a slow, cold rhythm. Inside, Eleanor reached for a pen, then paused. The ink hovered over the first line of the ballot. She didn't sign it. Not yet. Instead, she stared out the window toward the town she'd lived in for nearly 50 years. a town where people still waved when they passed, where lies didn't usually come from the mouths of blood. A small voice buzzed from her kitchen phone. New voicemail. One message. She played it. Grandma, I didn't know he was going to say that. I swear. Molly's voice. Shaken. Honest. Eleanor didn't delete the message. She listened to it twice. Then she walked back to the ballot. Unfolded. Unmarked. Still waiting. Her fingers brushed the signature line again, but didn't sign. Instead, she opened her desk drawer, pulled out a manila envelope, and slid the ballot inside. This war needed strategy. And Eleanor Briggs? She was alive, registered, and very much watching. The old courthouse smelled like dust and pine cleaner, sterile and forgotten, like a place time had mostly abandoned. Eleanor's footsteps echoed as she passed the tiled vestibule, her shoes clicking like punctuation marks. She clutched her purse tight to her side, ballot still tucked inside, and paused only when she reached the glass partition labeled Voter Services. Behind the counter sat a young man in a maroon polo, scrolling lazily through something on his monitor. He looked up, startled by her presence. "Hi, can I help you?" "Yes," Eleanor said, placing her voter registration card on the counter like a badge. "I need verification of my voter status. Today." He blinked, then nodded, swiveling toward his keyboard. "Sure thing, ma'am. Just give me a second to pull you up. Name and date of birth?" "Eleanor May Briggs, August 12, 1952. Click, click. The sound of keys echoed against the marble walls. A printer in the corner sputtered to life. The young man retrieved the printout, eyebrows rising slightly as he looked it over. "You're definitely active," he said with a small wry smile. "Most recent registration confirmed in March. You even signed up for absentee ballot tracking. Want a copy of this?" "I want two," she replied. "Stamped and signed." As he reached for the county notary stamp, she asked, "Does it say anything about me being deceased?" He paused. "No, of course not." "Why?" She looked him square in the eyes. "Because my son said I was on live television." His lips parted but no words came. 10 minutes later, Eleanor stepped back out into the Iowa sun, two crisp sheets in her hand and her purse zipped like armor. The wind had picked up, rustling leaves down Main Street. She didn't stop walking until she reached the little public bench outside the coffee shop, an open-air pocket of shade with a decent signal. She opened her flip phone and selected a contact, Stan Lurie, Cedar Post. She hadn't spoken to Stan in years, not since she wrote a letter to the editor correcting one of his constitutional misquotes. He called her the grammar grenade. She hadn't minded. The call rang once. "Stan Lurie," came the voice. Dry. Alert. "It's Eleanor Briggs." A beat. "Well, I'll be. I figured you were dead," she said calmly. "I'm not. But someone on your front page said otherwise." She heard him inhale. "I saw the debate replay this morning. I didn't believe it. Not for a second. I have voter status documentation, signed and stamped. I'm faxing it now." There was a shuffle of papers on his end. "You smell that?" he muttered. "Dust?" "Story," he corrected. "And a cover-up." She hung up. The fax went through 30 minutes later. Stan confirmed with a single text. Front page. Tomorrow. Title. The Ghost Vote. Eleanor stared out at the town from her porch that evening. Porch light buzzed. Somewhere down the block, wind chimes flickered out a lullaby of summer metal. The copy of the report sat folded beside her, weighted by a chipped ceramic frog. She stood, walked back inside, and picked up the cordless phone from its cradle. "You've reached Eleanor Briggs. Alive, voting, and watching." She saved the message. That night, her phone buzzed again, this time a text from Molly. "Grandma. I didn't know he'd say that. I swear. I thought it was just debate theater. I didn't think." Eleanor didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, she walked to her filing cabinet, thumbed through a drawer labeled Public Records, and found a form she hadn't touched in years. Media Request Form, Cedar Falls Public Broadcasting. She circled Certified Transcript Request. At the bottom, under event title, she wrote in block letters, "City Council Candidate Debate. June 15th. Then she clicked her pen closed, sharp and final. The air inside Cedar Falls City Hall felt too cold for mid-June, like it had been chilled in anticipation of confrontation. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, flickering slightly as Eleanor stepped through the glass doors. Her heels clicked across the polished tile, sharp and measured, like she was pacing out a verdict. In her hand she clutched the envelope, the absentee ballot she had waited to sign, until she could look the institution in the face. She wasn't mailing it. No. This time the living would deliver the receipt herself. A woman behind the ballot drop window glanced up and offered a polite, bureaucratic smile. "Dropping off for someone?" she asked. "For myself," Eleanor said, despite reports to the contrary. The clerk tilted her head, confused, but accepted the envelope. Before letting go, Eleanor peeled a small yellow post-it from her purse and stuck it right on the front, handwritten in clean cursive. "In memory of the woman you said was gone." She smiled without warmth, and walked out before the clerk could respond. Outside, the summer heat hit like a second opinion. She paused on the front steps, pulling out her phone. The ballot confirmation email from the county was already in her inbox, time-stamped, automated but real. She forwarded it to Stan Lurie, with no subject line, and just 3 words in the body. "Proof, confirmed. Alive." Across town, Stan's newsroom lit up. 10 minutes later, his article hit the Cedar Post website, and was shared on Facebook over 1,200 times in 2 hours. Headline: Local candidate declares alive mother deceased. She just voted. The photo accompanying it was from Eleanor's old teaching days, her standing in front of a whiteboard labeled Truth in Governance, pointing at a civics chart with the kind of poise that even time couldn't erase. She hadn't known that photo still existed. Stan did. Of course he did. By late afternoon, Russell's campaign office issued a lukewarm apology that felt like it had been microwaved from a half-frozen statement. Council candidate Russell Briggs regrets a moment of confusion during the debate. He misunderstood a question regarding family, and intended only to honor his late mother-in-law, who passed in 2019. He deeply respects all voters, living or past. Eleanor read it aloud to Janice over tea. The whistle of the kettle masked her initial scoff. "He misunderstood birth and death," Janice said flatly, nearly dropping a tea bag into her lap. "That man doesn't belong in office. He belongs in theater. Bad theater." Eleanor stirred her tea slowly, methodically. "He's not just lying, he's measuring what he can get away with. That's worse." Janice leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. "Well, he mismeasured this one." Later that evening, Eleanor sat on her porch again, watching the streetlights blink on one by one. The town felt different now, like it had noticed her again, like the silence that used to insulate her had started to crack. Her phone buzzed. "Molly, he says you blindsided him. He's pissed. Dina's talking about suing the paper." Eleanor stared at the message for a long while, then slowly typed back, "Tell her public lies have public consequences." No response, until 20 minutes later. "Molly, she just filed a privacy complaint against Stan. I heard her yelling into the phone about elder drama." Eleanor set the phone down. The porch light hummed above her, casting her shadow long across the floorboards. A car passed slowly on the street, its headlights sweeping over her mailbox. She smiled. Let them file. Let them yell. They had picked the wrong ghost to provoke. The cursor blinked on the blank page like a dare. Eleanor adjusted her reading glasses, her fingers hovering above the keys. The coffee beside her had gone cold, untouched since sunrise. On her laptop screen, the domain had just gone live. aliveandvoting.org, a name chosen not for irony, but for precision. They had tried to bury her beneath silence. She would answer with clarity. Molly sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop open, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Okay," she said, not looking up. "The landing page is ready. Voter registration card uploaded. Ballot confirmation. County records file. Stan's article embedded with source link. What else do you want on it?" "Video," Eleanor said. "They need to see me, hear me." Molly glanced up. Cautious. Are you sure? This isn't going to stay small. We can still. I was declared dead on live television. Eleanor said, if we whisper now, we let that stick. Molly closed her laptop with a decisive snap. Then we record now. The living room turned into a makeshift studio. Molly propped her phone on a stack of cookbooks, adjusting the angle until the screen framed Eleanor squarely in front of the mantel. The voter documents spread neatly on the table behind her like courtroom exhibits. Okay, Grandma. Just talk. Be you. Eleanor smoothed her shirt, inhaled and looked straight into the lens. My name is Eleanor Briggs. I am alive. I voted. And I'm not going anywhere. She paused. Let the silence sit. My son declared me dead on television, then used that lie to curry sympathy during a debate. I taught civics in this town for 30 years. I taught students about truth, accountability, public service, and I won't let anyone, blood or otherwise, erase me to win an election. She reached back, holding up her absentee confirmation with a quiet, deliberate firmness. I have proof. I have a voice. And starting today, I have a platform. Welcome to Alive and Voting. Molly tapped the screen, ending the recording. For a moment, the only sound was the soft hum of the fridge in the kitchen. Then she looked at her grandmother and whispered, that was fire. By the next morning, the video had been viewed over 8,000 times. A retired city clerk commented, I filed her paperwork last March. This woman is a cornerstone, not a casualty. A local parent reposted it with the caption, Mrs. Briggs taught my twins. She's no ghost, she's a watchdog. The clip was played on the local AM radio morning segment. It even showed up on the Facebook page of a diner halfway across the county. By afternoon, aliveandvoting.org had crashed once. Too much traffic, too fast. Stan called that evening, laughter behind his voice. You just became the most credible voter in the county. Eleanor sat at her desk, staring out at the wind-ruffled lawn. I didn't plan on going viral, Stan. No one credible ever does, he said. But this is good trouble, Eleanor. She allowed herself a small smile, but it faded quickly when her email pinged. She opened the new message. The subject line read, Cease and desist. Violation of campaign privacy and defamation. Briggs' campaign attached was a PDF, all caps legal language, and a signature from a Chicago-based law firm Russell's campaign had retained. The message ended plainly. Take the site down within 48 hours, or we escalate. Eleanor didn't flinch. She didn't even close the document. She simply turned her head, called into the hallway. Molly, she said. Steady. Can we add a new tab to the website? Yeah, came the reply from the other room. What for? Eleanor leaned back, her voice clear and sharp. I'd like to upload this letter. Eleanor pressed record without blinking. Her living room was lit only by soft afternoon sun filtering through linen curtains, but the light was enough. She sat squarely in frame, a folded legal letter in her hand, her voter card and county record behind her on the side table like loyal witnesses. This, she began, lifting the cease and desist letter into view, arrived from my son's campaign attorney. It accuses me of defamation. It demands I take down my website. It threatens legal action if I continue speaking. Her voice didn't shake. If anything, it sharpened. But I will not take it down. I will not go quiet, because if telling the truth about who I am, and the lie he told, is considered defamatory. She looked directly in the lens. Then my son is not qualified to lead this town. She unfolded the document, eyes scanning the language, and read it aloud line by line. As the camera rolled, she dissected each paragraph with the slow, patient tone of someone who'd once taught seventh graders how to read the Constitution. Paragraph 3 says the campaign suffered irreparable harm. She tapped the page once. The harm was done by the lie. I'm just the woman they buried trying to crawl out from under it. By the time the video ended, it was nearly 12 minutes long. Eleanor didn't smile, or offer a call to action. She simply said, I am Eleanor Briggs, alive, voting, watching. Then she uploaded it to aliveandvoting.org, clicked publish. and turned to find Janice at the screen door with a grocery bag and an idea. "I'm throwing a brunch," Janice declared, walking in like she owned the place. "This Sunday, in the backyard. We're calling it Alive and Kicking. Mimosas, muffins, truth. You'll be the guest of honor." Eleanor raised a brow. "Won't that be seen as political?" Janice grinned. "Everything's political when a woman your age refuses to disappear." By Sunday, 37 people filled Eleanor's backyard under Janice's weathered party tent. Neighbors, former students, old PTA moms, even the mail carrier who still remembered her bundt cake from 2003. Each guest wore a small white pin with handwritten black letters. "Ask me about Eleanor." Someone brought folding chairs. Someone else brought quiche. Stan Lurie showed up in a corduroy blazer with a handheld mic and a smartphone on a tripod. "I'm not speaking," Eleanor warned. "You don't have to," Stan said. "Your story rewarder." Molly stood beside her grandma most of the morning, phone in hand, her eyes darting to and from the party, occasionally tapping notes into a doc she wouldn't let anyone see. She kept watching Dina, who lingered near the hedges, face hidden behind oversized sunglasses, clutching a cold cup of coffee she never sipped. Eleanor pretended not to notice. But she did. Later that night, as the last chairs were stacked and Janice collected paper plates like a battlefield medic, Molly hesitated in the hallway with her phone. "Grandma, I need to show you something." Eleanor turned down the television. Molly pressed play. The screen showed Russell furious, pacing in their living room. Dina sat on the couch, arms folded, staring away from him. "You were supposed to handle this," Russell snapped. It was a sympathy pivot, a simple nod. "You let it explode." "I didn't make her come back from the dead, Russell," Dina fired back. "You made it worse. You gave her a stage." Molly paused the video. "I didn't mean to record it," she said. I left my phone on while they argued. I thought you should hear it." Eleanor said nothing, just gently took the phone, hit save, and set it down next to the cease and desist letter. Then she walked to the kitchen, opened a drawer, and pulled out a government form she hadn't touched in years. "Election ethics violation complaint, State of Iowa." The pen glided across the paper, like it had been waiting for her hand. Eleanor had been flipping through the American Republic, a frayed old textbook she used to assign in her civics class, when the photograph slipped free and fluttered to the hardwood floor. The light caught its glossy surface, and for a moment she didn't recognize the boy in the cap and gown. Then her heart twisted. Russell, age 17, grinning like he'd already won something. And next to him, arm around his shoulder, was Eleanor. Her smile was softer, earnest, hopeful in that old bruisable way mothers had when they still believed they'd raised someone kind. Her thumb brushed across the edge of the photo. It wasn't staged. No campaign lighting. No curated press smiles. Just a moment in June, frozen in light and ink, before ambition soured the boy into someone who'd later pretend she was dead for a soundbite. She turned the photo over. On the back, written in Russell's own handwriting, "We did it, Mom." She stared at that sentence for a long time before crossing the room, unlocking the roll-top desk, and scanning the photo into her laptop. She uploaded it to aliveandvoting.org, and attached one simple caption: "For the record, I raised the man who tried to erase me." She didn't tag anyone, didn't share it to her personal page, but within 4 hours, the photo had been reposted over 100 times. That evening, it showed up on a Cedar Falls community page. By morning, someone had turned it into a meme. And by noon, Stan Lurie had it framed atop a front-page expose titled "History Cropped, A Mother's Vote Against Erasure." Inside the article, Stan traced Eleanor's civic work back decades, highlighting her volunteer efforts, her former role on the school board, even an old op-ed she'd penned in 2002 defending the First Amendment, when the town tried to ban a library book. The final paragraph read, "You can disagree with Eleanor Briggs, but you cannot deny she exists, and if a campaign strategy requires her disappearance, perhaps we need to re-examine who we're letting lead." By late afternoon, a bouquet of white daisies and red zinnias appeared at Eleanor's doorstep. No note, just a card that read, Keep going. We see you. She placed the vest on her mantle beneath the photo. Meanwhile, Molly had started to shift, subtly but undeniably. She unfollowed her father's campaign account on Instagram. She removed the campaign intern title from her LinkedIn bio. When asked about her family in a school civics project, she wrote, "My grandmother taught me democracy is something you defend, even at the dinner table." Dina, however, noticed. "You're embarrassing your father," she snapped one morning, loud enough for Molly's voice recorder to catch. "You think people won't notice when you pull back? They'll think we're fractured." "We are fractured," Molly replied calmly. "You just keep gluing over the cracks." The tension inside the campaign headquarters grew like a storm cell, low pressure, rising fast, and then it broke. 2 days after the photo went viral, Russell's campaign manager, Darren Michaels, submitted a one-sentence resignation. "I can no longer, in good conscience, represent this campaign due to a conflict of integrity." The press latched on within the hour. Stan's follow-up tweet said it best. "First she returned from the grave. Now the campaign's losing its spine." Eleanor read the headline while sipping black coffee on her porch. For the first time since this began, she didn't feel hunted. She felt inevitable. The folding chairs kept coming. Rows of them borrowed from the VFW hall, the Methodist church, and Janice's cousin's garage. By 10:30 the yard was full. By 11 people were lining up on the sidewalk, coffee cups in hand, scanning the homemade sign above the tent entrance. "Civics, Coffee and Clarity, a community fundraiser for civic education," hosted by Eleanor Briggs, the same woman her own son had declared dead 2 weeks earlier. Eleanor watched from the back porch, one hand wrapped around a thermos, the other gripping the edge of the railing. She could smell lemon bars, mulched grass, and the subtle sharpness of campaign nerves unraveling. Janice's tent, weather-stained but sturdy, fluttered slightly in the breeze like a flag refusing to fall. "Looks like you started something," Stan said beside her, tugging at the collar of his dress shirt. "This crowd, bigger than Russell's last town hall." "I didn't start it," Eleanor replied. "They did. I just answered." Stan grinned. Still hell of an answer. The event was simple but purposeful. No podiums, no slogans, just folding tables with handouts on voting rights, old photos from Eleanor's classroom, and donation jars labeled "Support Local Civics." What she thought would draw maybe 20 retirees had turned into a full-on community gathering. Kids ran between folding legs with juice boxes. Teachers she hadn't seen in years stopped to hug her. A local hardware store covered the cost of the sound system. The bakery donated muffins shaped like miniature ballot boxes. And then Molly stepped up to the microphone. The crowd settled with the kind of hush that only conviction commands. Molly, in jeans and a plain white tee, unfolded a piece of paper with slight tremor in her fingers, but not in her voice. "I wrote this last night," she said. "It's called For the Grandmothers They Tried to Ghost." Her voice filled the tent, clear, soft, then rising. "You built the sidewalks they now run their campaigns on. You taught them to read ballots before they read polls. They mistook your stillness for absence. They mistook your silence for surrender. But you are here, and you are teaching again." The final line cracked slightly, but Molly didn't break. "And if they dare write you off again, you will write yourselves back in louder." The applause didn't explode. It rose. A standing wave of clapping hands, some wiping eyes, others clutching their chests. Eleanor didn't cry, but she felt something unfasten inside her. A pressure, a weight she hadn't admitted to carrying. Later Janice whispered, "You know, I haven't seen a fundraiser without a candidate in 20 years, and yet, this feels more political than any of them." Stan's next article came the following morning. The headline read, "The Power of Still Being Here, One Woman's Campaign for Truth." By the end of the week, 2 longtime Russell endorsers publicly withdrew their support. One called it a values misalignment. The other simply said, "I've met Eleanor now. That's enough." And just as the momentum built, just as the town started to echo with Eleanor's name in grocery lines and school lots, Dina struck back. On a mid-morning local radio segment, the host asked casually, "So what's it been like for your family dealing with the media frenzy?" Dina, Always poised, didn't miss a beat. Her voice syrupy, concerned. Well, it's been hard. Eleanor has a complicated history with reality. We've dealt with some memory issues for years. Sometimes when the past gets fuzzy, people start filling in blanks with emotion. The host hesitated. So you're saying, I'm saying, Dina interrupted. This may not be political. It might be personal and medical. That evening, someone tagged Eleanor in the broadcast transcript online. She didn't say a word. She just clicked save on the clip. The accusation was subtle, but Eleanor knew poison didn't always arrive in bottles marked toxic. Sometimes it wore pearls and spoke in pitying tones on public radio. Memory issues. Complicated history with reality. Eleanor had heard the clip a dozen times since Dina aired it. Never shouting, never slandering, just letting doubt drip like a slow leak in a basement ceiling. And Eleanor? She decided to answer the only way she knew how, with a challenge. By Monday morning, a new event flyer appeared on the Cedar Falls Public Library bulletin board, flipped in a no-nonsense serif font. The Memory Test, a Civic Literacy Challenge, with Eleanor Briggs' open invitation. Council candidate Russell Briggs and campaign manager Dina Briggs, hosted by the Cedar Falls Library Education Board. This Saturday at 11 a.m. Vertical Bar Community Room. No speeches, no press, just questions and answers. She made sure the entire town knew it wasn't a stunt. It was a civics quiz. 10 questions, each covering constitutional law, municipal governance, voting rights, and Iowa state legislation. The same kind of quiz she once gave her 8th graders. By Thursday, local news picked it up. By Friday, Russell's office issued a statement. While Mr. Briggs supports all forms of civic education, he will not participate in political stunts orchestrated by individuals engaged in ongoing defamation. Dina reposted the statement with a red heart emoji. Eleanor didn't flinch. She just sharpened her pencils. Saturday morning arrived with crisp air and sun that felt like it had something to prove. Library staff pulled extra chairs into community room. Janice brought lemon scones. Stan arrived with his notepad, though he promised not to interfere. At precisely 11:03 a.m., Eleanor took her seat alone at the front table. The moderators, a retired social studies teacher and a local judge, nodded in greeting. "Shall we begin?" one asked. Eleanor clicked her pen. The questions weren't easy. Some were intentionally nuanced. What clause in the Iowa Constitution guarantees home rule authority for cities? List 2 specific responsibilities of a city council under municipal law. Under what circumstances can a voter challenge be filed during an election in Iowa? She didn't hesitate, didn't look around for approval. Her handwriting remained smooth, her eyes calm. When she finished, she stood and handed over the exam. "I may be 72, she said to the room, "but I still remember the things that matter." 2 hours later, the library issued an official statement. Eleanor Briggs scored 10/10 on the Civic Literacy Challenge. Exam proctored. Results verified. Test now on public display. A laminated copy was mounted on the community board outside the reading room. Beneath it, a photo of Eleanor mid-answer, glasses perched low, focus sharp as ever. Later that night, in the comments section of the Cedar Post story, a familiar name appeared. Eric D. Morrison. "She taught me AP Civics. I use what she taught me in court every damn day. The woman is sharper than half my law professors." Another comment followed from a middle school teacher. "Eleanor Briggs is a walking constitution. I still use her lesson plans." In Molly's room under soft lamplight, her laptop glowed with a new document, College Application Essay, Draft 4. She titled it "The Truth is Not a Memory Test." The first line read, "When your family becomes a campaign weapon, you learn fast how courage sounds, especially when it whispers." And the last, "My grandmother isn't fading. She's being heard, finally." That same evening, as Eleanor folded laundry with a local radio station humming in the background, a passing note caught her ear. This year's Veterans Association annual honoré brunch has posted an updated speaker list online. Council candidate Russell Briggs, originally listed, is no longer scheduled to appear. She froze, one towel half folded in her hands. The announcer didn't elaborate. But Eleanor knew. This was what happened when truth took root. One name erased. Properly this time. The polling station smelled like Clorox wipes and coffee, sterile and familiar, like democracy in practice. Eleanor stood behind the check-in table in a pale blue button-down, her name tag reading E. Briggs, volunteer, and a small American flag pin fastened neatly to her collar. Her hands, calm and deliberate, slid ballots forward one by one, her voice measured as she greeted each voter. It had been years since she'd worked the polls, but when early voting opened in Cedar Falls, Eleanor didn't hesitate. She called the Board of Elections herself and asked where they needed hands. The room they assigned her to? Ward 3, Russell's district. By 8:15 a.m., the line wrapped out the door. No one expected that, and no one expected what happened next. "Ma'am," a middle-aged man said as he reached the front of the line, squinting at her, "are you? Wait, you're her, the mom." Eleanor raised a brow, not quite smiling. "Still alive," she said, "and still processing ballots." He let out a soft laugh, like he'd just seen a legend. A younger woman behind him added, "My mom showed me your website. We watched your debate video over dinner." By noon, people weren't just coming to vote. They were coming to see her. They brought baked goods, water bottles, even handwritten thank you notes. One woman dropped off a small framed cross-stitch that read, "Truth never dies." Eleanor never left her post. Meanwhile, across the parking lot, Stan Lurie was filming from a respectful distance. His short documentary, Still Here, Still Voting, was part interview, part montage, part quiet revolution. It showed Eleanor opening the precinct, organizing signage, gently helping a nervous first-time voter double-check their ID. The doc hit 10,000 views online by sunset. By midnight, it had doubled. 2 days later, a student reporter named Kayla, working with her college media group out of Des Moines, posted a feature titled "The Ghost Who Voted: How One Iowa Grandmother Became the Voice of Accountability." Within hours, it was reblogged nationally, then picked up by Politico Midwest. The story didn't paint Eleanor as some quirky grandmother or pitiful pawn. It positioned her as a woman reclaiming public space with facts, presence, and radical calm. The coverage worked like oxygen. Online conversations turned. Voter engagement spiked. Even undecideds started reconsidering their loyalty, not because Eleanor screamed, but because she stayed. And Russell noticed. In a press conference outside his campaign headquarters, his voice tight, eyes blinking too often, he lashed out, "What we're seeing here is a coordinated bias by the election board. My own mother, who's clearly had a history of confusion, is now being used as a political mascot. This isn't voter engagement. This is manipulation." The statement might have landed if not for the board's response. The next morning, the election board chair, Patricia Keeney, appeared on local radio. Her words were clipped but dry as kindling. "Mr. Briggs's mother is not confused. She's active, and if that bothers him, he might reflect on why she felt compelled to get involved in the first place." Eleanor didn't comment. She just showed up the next day in a windbreaker and sneakers, setting out chairs before the doors opened. That evening, as Molly stirred soup in the kitchen, she glanced up at the television. A breaking news crawl scrolled along the bottom of the screen. New polling data: Briggs down 19 points in key wards. Female voters over 50 swing hardest. Molly turned toward her grandmother. "You didn't raise your voice," she said. "You just kept showing up." Eleanor poured herself tea, her hands steady as ever. "I told you," she replied. "They counted me out." "But the county?" She smiled, slow and sharp. "They know how to count." Outside, a car honked as it passed their house. A voice shouted from the window, "Still voting, Mrs. Briggs." Eleanor didn't wave. She just stood there, tall and utterly present. The camera's red light blinked once, steady and waiting. Eleanor leaned forward in her wooden chair, fingers folded neatly in her lap. A black Sharpie rested beside her, uncapped, deliberate. No makeup, no filter, just afternoon light pouring in from the kitchen window, and the weight of her words about to drop. "I voted today," she said, voice level. She reached off screen and held up her write-in ballot receipt. Name of candidate? Her eyes locked on the camera. I wrote one word, fraud. She held the paper closer, sharp lettering visible. Because that's who he is. And because I had to write something. If I didn't speak now, I'd be letting him finish the lie he started. She clicked off the camera. By sunset, the clip was everywhere, shared across Cedar Falls Facebook groups, stitched into TikToks by teenagers, played aloud at kitchen tables and gas station counters. Someone made a graphic, vote fraud. Stamp out the real one. Someone else screen printed it on a t-shirt. A woman named Patrice at the post office turned in her absentee ballot the next day. For the write-in she printed fraud. Not an actual person, just to be clear. She posted it with a caption, inspired by Eleanor. I'm not voting against a man. I'm voting against what he became. By midweek, the Board of Elections received 17 ballots with fraud as the write-in. One ballot simply read, whoever Eleanor Briggs trusts. Russell's campaign was cornered. He didn't smile at his next press conference. He fumed, suit too tight at the shoulders, jaw clenched. The flags behind him flapped like they were trying to leave. This is elder manipulation, he snapped. My own mother's being used as a tool by political enemies who want to turn a personal moment into a vendetta. What we're seeing here is targeted harassment from people who should know better. When asked who was orchestrating it, he didn't answer. When asked if he stood by his original debate statement, he looked down and walked off the podium. Across town, in Janice's living room, the ladies were watching it all unfold with popcorn and iced tea. Elder manipulation. Janice scoffed. You know what that sounds like. A man who just got outsmarted by a woman knitting her truth together in a rocking chair. Eleanor didn't laugh. She sat quietly, staring at the paused frame of Russell storming off the stage. Then she said softly, he's unraveling. You didn't have to yell, Janice added. You just had to tell the truth loud enough for people to hear. Molly, curled on the carpet near the fireplace, looked up from her phone. They're posting his debate quote with the caption, "May she rest under your voting selfie," she said. Dozens of people, some are writing in fraud, just to be funny, but most of them are serious. You used to be the footnote. Now you're the headline. Eleanor gave a dry smile. Sometimes history flips the script. That evening, as the kitchen windows steamed from a pot of chili, and the house settled into its autumn creep, Eleanor received a new email from Stan with the subject line, "Breaking complaint filed against Briggs." Inside was a scan of an official document, an ethics complaint from another council candidate. The statement was direct, knowingly misrepresenting the death of a living voter, particularly one registered and active, is a direct violation of the public trust. Attached was a digital signature. The rival wasn't running a strong campaign until now. Eleanor closed the laptop slowly, the screen's glow dimming across her face. Outside, rain began to fall, soft, steady, almost rhythmic. Inside, momentum was building. It was Eleanor's handwriting that made the room go still, neat, intentional. In permanent ink across the top of the first page, testimony regarding misrepresentation and suppression of a legal voter, Eleanor May Briggs. At the Cedar Falls County Election Board office, she sat across from two clerks and a notary, the re heavy with printer toner and fluorescent light. She slid a thick manila envelope forward. Inside, her notarized account, scanned ballot confirmations, video stills, dates, screenshots, time-stamped footage, a transcript of Russell's televised claim, and one flash drive, containing not only her original debate video, but also a carefully compiled reel of Dina mocking her on radio, and the leaked clip of Russell's off-camera meltdown. None of it doctored. All of it raw. One of the clerks, mid-pins 40s, glasses slipping down his nose, skimmed the top page. "Mrs. Briggs, this is thorough. I taught civic truth for 30 years, Eleanor said. You learn not to show up empty-handed." The notary gave a slow, silent nod before stamping the final page. The echo of the seal hitting paper felt final, like the locking of a door behind someone. When she left the building, the wind had picked up, carrying dry leaves down the sidewalk in frantic little spirals. Across the street, Stan was already waiting by his car. "You filed?" he asked. "I did more than file," Eleanor said, tucking her scarf tighter. "I anchored it." The headline went live that night on the Cedar Post's website. Proof of presence, a mother's stand against erasure. It included downloadable PDFs of Eleanor's full submission, a timeline, a video link, a quote that stunned half the county. "He didn't just lie about me, he tried to erase the idea that we as elders still matter. I vote, I speak, and I will not be deleted." The views broke 50,000 within 48 hours. Then the money dried up. One by one, Russell's top-tier donors issued retraction statements. A local construction exec withdrew his PAC contribution. A former campaign bundler posted a single-sentence resignation on social media. "I no longer support a candidate who silences the woman who raised him." Dina, ever image-conscious, tried to pivot, hosting a Unity in the Family event. But it backfired, hard. Someone no one ever claimed it, leaked a clip to Stan. In it, Dina could be heard backstage at the fundraiser, laughing with a staffer over mini crab cakes. These seniors, they'd believe an email from Elvis if you told them it came with a sticker. Eleanor should be at Shady Pines, not City Hall. The audio spread like wildfire. Within hours, local radio shows played it in segments. A morning DJ opened with, "Well, Eleanor may not be dead, but that campaign sure is." At home, Eleanor watched it all from her armchair, wrapped in a patchwork throw. She didn't gloat, she didn't cheer. She opened a drawer, pulled out her will, and quietly made one change. She wrote in Molly's name as executor, and added a note in the margin, because she listened. Later that evening, as wind rattled the storm windows and Janice brought over peach cobbler, Eleanor's phone dinged with a news alert. Cedar Falls Gazette leak. Internal email reveals campaign strategy to bury the old story. The article was short, but damning. A staffer had forwarded the email to a reporter anonymously. Subject line, "UR Gent Final Week Strategy. Bury the old story." The content? A list of tactics to discredit Eleanor, scrub older press mentions, and overhaul candidate narrative with fresh community appeal. Stan reposted the leak with one caption, "When you bury the wrong story, it digs itself out." The auditorium lights dimmed just enough to hush the crowd. A rustle of jackets and shifting seats filled the room, then silence. Anticipation held the air tight, brittle. Eleanor Briggs stepped up to the podium, not grand, not high, just a humble mic stand and a folding table stacked with pamphlets about voter rights, civic literacy, and absentee registration. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't need to. "The lie was simple," she began, voice unshaken. So was the truth. From the second row, Janice sat with her arms crossed, chin lifted. Stan held a recorder in one hand, phone camera steady in the other. Molly sat center aisle, notebook open, not writing, just listening. Eleanor continued, "They said I was gone, that I couldn't vote, speak, or be counted. But here I am. Not louder, just unedited." She paused and scanned the crowd. Not just retirees and students this time. Young parents, veterans, a teenager in a Letterman jacket. Even a few familiar faces who'd once attended Russell's meet and greets, now sitting with furrowed brows and silent eyes. "I'm not here to campaign," Eleanor said. "I'm here to remind you that the tools we give our children, books, ballots, integrity, can be sharpened into weapons, or used to build." Applause was soft at first, then steady. By morning, a national elder advocacy blog picked up the clip. The headline read, "She was declared dead. Then she taught a town to pay attention." It included a full transcript, background on her story, and a sidebar on civic neglect among seniors. The story spread like sparks on prairie wind. Days later, Janice drove Eleanor to the town square after dark. "Come on," she said, waving a flashlight with a smirk. "What are we doing?" Eleanor asked, pulling her coat tighter as the wind picked up. They stopped by the walking path near the fountain. A new wooden bench stood beneath a maple tree, fresh varnish, clean slats. At its center a brass plaque read, "For those still here. E.B." Eleanor stared at it for a long while, then sat down. "I didn't say that." "No," Janice said, sitting beside her. "But you lived it." Meanwhile, in a taped radio interview 2 towns over, Russell sat with a campaign-friendly host, trying to steer the conversation back to zoning laws and development plans. But at minute 12, the interviewer asked, flatly, "Do you regret declaring your mother deceased?" Russell blinked, his practiced composure cracking just slightly. It was a miscommunication. It's been sensationalized. She's become a civic voice in the state," the host said. "You haven't addressed that." There was a flicker of something in Russell's face, pride curdling into resentment. He reached for his mic, then stood. "We're done here." The clip made rounds on social media under the tag, #walked out on mom again. That night, as Molly packed her backpack for school, she stood in Eleanor's doorway. "You know what scares me?" Eleanor looked up from her crossword. "What's that?" "If they lie about the people who raised them, what else is a lie?" Eleanor didn't respond with words. She folded the newspaper neatly and set it down, then reached for Molly's hand and squeezed. The next morning, a Cedar Falls podcast, titled Heartland Voices, uploaded a special episode, Ghost Vote, How Eleanor Briggs Resurrected Civic Accountability. They spliced in clips from her voter education talk, quotes from her former students, even a reading of Molly's college essay. It wasn't just a segment, it was a tribute. At 3:12 p.m. that afternoon, someone posted a screenshot of Russell's official campaign website. "This account has been temporarily disabled." No announcement, no redirect, just a digital blackout. The town noticed, so did the press. Eleanor, however, simply opened the mailbox, slipped in 2 handwritten letters, and smiled as the postman tipped his cap. The lights in the high school auditorium were too bright, too warm, casting halos over the candidates' heads like misplaced judgment. The crowd buzzed, but it wasn't the low hum of curiosity. It was tension, quiet, waiting to detonate. Front row, center, Eleanor Briggs sat in a pressed navy blazer, hands folded neatly in her lap, lips set like iron. She'd said she wouldn't attend, but sometimes presence was the loudest message. And tonight she intended to sit like a reminder neither camera nor candidate could avoid. The stage held 4 candidates, but only one had a story burning under the surface: Russell. He stood at the far right podium, his suit tailored tighter now, his expression carefully neutral. His campaign logo had been redesigned since the fallout, muted blues instead of bold reds, calmer, cleaner, as if a font could fix a fracture. The moderator, a young journalist from Iowa Public Broadcasting, took the mic. "Tonight's first question is for all candidates, but we'll begin with Mr. Briggs. The topic is integrity." She let the word breathe. "Define what it means to lead honestly, and whether you believe personal history should be part of public accountability." The room stilled. Even the air seemed to pause. Russell shifted, blinked twice. "Well, I believe integrity is about trust," he began, his voice even, "about learning from the past, and looking forward, about not letting personal attacks distract from." A low ripple of laughter rose from the back, not cruel, just tired. Worn thin patience breaking into audible disbelief. Russell froze, a muscle in his jaw twitched. He glanced too quickly toward the front row. Eleanor didn't blink. She didn't roll her eyes, didn't raise a brow. She just sat, alive and undeniable, in the seat his lies had tried to leave vacant. He tried to pivot, mention taxes, public parks, economic renewal. But the energy shifted, words deflated. Applause, when it came, was polite, like clapping after a child's recital performance that missed a few notes. 10 minutes in, Eleanor rose quietly. No fanfare, no coat swish or drama. Just a simple, graceful stand, every eye near the front turned. She picked up her purse, nodded once to the moderator who gave the faintest understanding smile, and walked the length of the aisle with her head held high. Stan Lurie was seated in the far corner with his press badge and camera. He caught the exit, every step. No flash, no commentary. Just a caption posted to his live stream within minutes. Class. Even in exit. On stage, Russell faltered mid-sentence. Lost his place. Tried to recover. He never fully did. After the debate, the crowd buzzed outside the auditorium. One woman whispered, "Did you see her leave?" Another added, "That walk said more than the whole stage combined." Molly met her grandmother near the exit doors, coat in hand. "You didn't say a word," she said softly. Eleanor smiled faintly. Didn't have to. Election day came quietly. No campaign parades. No final TV spots. Just ballots. And memories. And the final count? Russell Briggs lost by 318 votes. Stan broke the story at 10:42 p.m. sharp. The headline, "The Truth Voted Back." Across town, porch lights flicked on as news trickled out. Some cheered. Others whispered. A few cried not for loss, but for what had been narrowly avoided. At home, Eleanor sat on her porch swing, tea in hand, wind brushing against her cheek like a nod from the universe. Janice called from across the fence. 318. Not a landslide, but poetic. Eleanor didn't answer right away. She stared out at the quiet street, the same street where her mailbox had once held a cease and desist, where neighbors had left daisies, where she'd walked her own truth into town hall and asked it to be counted. "He started it with a lie," she finally said. "I ended it without raising my voice." And in that moment, as the screen inside her home blinked with the final numbers, one truth became painfully, perfectly clear. The envelope came in plain manila, no fanfare, just the seal of the Iowa State Election Integrity Board stamped above Eleanor's name, like punctuation at the end of a long, defiant sentence. She sat at her dining table with the windows open. Autumn wind rustled the corners of the mail stack. Her hands didn't tremble when she sliced it open. Inside, one page. "Miss Briggs, thank you for your submitted documentation and video record. We confirm your testimony contributed directly to the investigation and subsequent public action taken against the Briggs campaign. Your commitment to civic accuracy and elder voter rights is recognized and appreciated. Respectfully, Clara Voss, Chief Review Officer." She read it once, then again. Then she set it beside the teacup and quietly, methodically, pulled out a note. This one larger, thicker, already addressed to Des Moines. Inside, her final notarized account, not just about Russell, but about how public trust is corroded, not in grand gestures, but in the slow erosion of truth. She slid it in, sealed it, and stood. Janice drove her to the post office. No speech this time, no camera, just two women in sensible shoes, with a history between them longer than Russell's whole campaign. As Eleanor dropped the envelope in the steel mailbox, Janice exhaled slowly. "That it?" Eleanor nodded. "That's the one I meant to send first." Later that week, she was asked to attend a quiet ceremony at the Cedar Falls Civic Foundation. No crowd, just a plaque, a press photo, a small check to fund a new youth civic leadership program, now titled the Eleanor Vote Fund. She smiled for the camera, just once. The same afternoon, Molly stood on the auditorium stage at her high school, hands shaking only slightly as she adjusted the mic. Her presentation, "What My Grandmother Taught Me." "I used to think civic duty was about paperwork," she said, "or maybe yard signs, but I learned this year that sometimes it's about sitting still in a chair no one expected you to occupy, and letting the silence speak for itself." The audience didn't clap right away, not out of indifference, but reverence, a stillness of its own. Later that evening, at Eleanor's house, neighbors dropped by with brownies, cider, and handwritten notes. The front room smelled like apples and vanilla, and the low burn of the wood stove. Janice, drink in hand, raised it high. "To Eleanor," she said. "Declared dead, voted louder, and is now, what do the kids say?" "Legendary," Molly offered. Janice nodded. "Dead? Try legendary." Eleanor didn't correct her. She just sipped her cider and looked out the window. It was already dark, but the porch light had a soft halo around it, and the world felt quieter, not empty, settled. In her bedroom drawer, she retrieved one last ballot, midterm, local initiatives, nothing glamorous. She marked it carefully, signature steady. She had filed her final vote of the season. Or so she thought. The next morning, as she folded laundry with NPR murmuring in the background, a cream-colored envelope slid through the mail slot. No return address, just her name in careful black ink. Inside, one line, "Would you consider running for local board?" No, dear Miss Briggs. No pitch, no promise, just a line, a question, and a pen enclosed in the envelope. She stared at it, the same way she once stared at her unsigned absentee ballot weeks ago, not ready to answer, but very much alive to consider it. The envelope was pale yellow, sealed with a wrinkled thank you sticker that had seen better days. Eleanor turned it over gently, the creases along the paper soft under her fingertips, like it had been carried in someone's purse or back pocket for a while before being sent. She sat on the porch swing, the morning sun warming the wood beneath her. Leaves rustled above. The scent of fresh-cut grass and brewing coffee drifted out from the kitchen screen door. In the distance, a mower hummed, regular, grounding. She opened the letter slowly, not out of hesitation, but reverence. Dear Miss Briggs, I don't know you. I live in Davenport. But my daughter sent me your video, the one where you said you were still here. My mother passed last year. She never missed a vote. Not once. Watching you reminded me of her. The way she sat up straighter when she talked about elections. Thank you for reminding the rest of us what being counted really means. You weren't just speaking for yourself. You were speaking for all of us who've ever been told we're past our moment. Turns out maybe we're the ones the moment's been waiting for. Sincerely, a grateful voter. Eleanor read it twice, then folded it back along its worn crease and placed it on the armrest beside her tea. A soft ping buzzed from her phone on the windowsill. She picked it up expecting spam. Instead, a message lit the screen, alive and voting. Clip resurfaces as Gen Z TikTok trend #still here challenge hits 2M views. Her clip, the one with the worn blazer and the steady voice and the line about truth being defamed. Kids were reposting it, duetting it, turning it into something new. Eleanor let out a breath, not quite a laugh. The kind of breath you release when the tide starts to pull away and you realize you're still standing. She stood, stretched her legs, and walked inside. The air smelled like cinnamon and heat from the old radiator. She passed the living room where her framed certificate from the Cedar Falls Civic Foundation sat on the mantel, next to the small plaque from the town square bench. Both leaned slightly, imperfect, but grounded. She walked to the hallway bookshelf, found the second shelf from the bottom, the one Russell used to sit beside with construction paper and glue sticks, when he was still small enough to ask questions instead of avoid them. She reached behind the stack of civics for young minds and the Constitution, annotated, and pulled out a faded blue binder. Her teacher's binder. Tabs still intact, some bent, a few crinkled by time and use. Handwritten lesson plans, primary source packets, even old notes from students. Mrs. Briggs, thanks for not giving up on me. I passed the citizenship test. You were right, it mattered. She set it down on the dining table just as the screen door creaked open behind her. Grandma, Molly peeked in, laptop in hand. I've been thinking. Eleanor turned. About, I want to build something, Molly said, stepping fully inside. A site for voter education. Not just registration links, but real tools. What laws mean, how power works, why people matter. Eleanor raised a brow. Ambitious. Maybe, but I think you already started it. Molly placed her laptop on the table beside the binder. Want to help me? Eleanor didn't hesitate. She reached out and flipped open the first page of her old notes. Let's teach them to write things down, she said. Especially the truth. The two of them stood there, past and present, experience and purpose, leaning over the same mission. Outside, wind brushed the window panes. Somewhere down the block, a delivery truck rolled past, its engine a low rumble beneath the quiet. Eleanor glanced at the plaque on the bookshelf one more time. The brass letters caught the light. Then she whispered to no one in particular. But with all the weight in the world, he said I was dead. I showed him what alive really looks like.